Okay, well, good morning, 8th and ninth grade. I hope it's going well. Today, we're going to start a new chapter. This is 13.1, okay, and you will definitely want to turn there. This is page 532. Okay, this is some new homework. This is a totally new concept, but one that you're going to really get in Algebra 2 especially. So I really wanted to touch on it before you all leave this class, okay? So if you look with me on page 532, it says a rational expression. Okay, so we have this phrase rational expression, and it must occur when the denominator is not 0. Okay, when it is not 0. So we need to find out how to make these, which ones are not going to make it 0. Okay, so let's look at an example. Sorry, that's harder to explain than I thought it would be. So if we look at something like this, x minus 6 divided by x minus 9, right? We're saying what on the bottom. So this is when it says, when it uses this word excluded, okay? So this is going to be the beginning of the homework. You always look to the denominator only. Denominator only. Key part, it's only the denominator. When it uses the word excluded, we're only looking down here. So we want to make sure that this does not equal 0, right? If this equals 0, then we don't have a fraction. So all I do is I set it equal to 0. I add 9, and I get x equals 9. So what can it not be? This right here, x equals 9, is the excluded. Okay, if x equaled 9, what would I have? I'd have 9 minus 9, and that would be 0. And I can't have 0 in the denominator of a fraction. So x, in this sense, actually becomes x cannot equal 9, if you just want to write it that way. Okay, let's do another one. That's pretty straightforward. Right, what if it was 3 divided by x plus 4? Okay, if I want to know what's excluded, all I do is set this one equal to 0. So I get x plus 4 equals 0. I subtract 4. I'm left with x equals negative 4. But in this case, I want to know what it cannot equal. And so my final answer is x cannot be negative 4. Now, where this gets more fun, and this is example 1. Okay, so this is an example 1. If you want to follow along, which you will. This is part B. Okay, part B. And look what it has on the bottom. It has something big on top, and the top doesn't matter. Whatever's up here doesn't matter. But look at the bottom. It's x squared minus 8x plus 7. Now, if I want to set this equal to 0, right, this is what we did in the last section. Now I have to try and solve and see when does that equal 0. So I do x and x, right? What times what here is going to give me 7. Well, the only factors of 7 are 1 and 7. And this is a positive, so the signs must be the same, but this is a negative, so they both have to be negative. Okay, so I have x minus 7 and x minus 1. So now I solve each one individually, like our last lesson. So I do x minus 1 equals 0, add 1, boom. I get x equals 1. There's 1. And then I do it to this one. I do x minus 7 equals 0, add 7. I get x equals 7. Yay, those are my two answers. But what are we trying to find? We're trying to find what down here on the denominator would be excluded. What we can't have it as an answer, so I must write the little bar showing that no, it cannot be that way. So these are the two answers to this problem. X cannot be 7, and x cannot be 1. Okay, so all we're doing there is factoring. Okay, now the fun part here, if you look at part C of this example, so this is the same example, but this is part C on the next page, you have to use the quadratic equation. Okay, because they have something on top, which is going to call x because it doesn't really matter, and then all that's on the bottom is x squared plus 3x minus 9, and obviously nothing is going to factor that. So then we have to use the quadratic formula to solve it. So we use negative b, so that's this guy, negative 3, so negative 3 plus or minus the square root of 4, so we have 4 times ac, so we have minus 4 times, b squared minus 4ac. b squared in this case is 3 squared minus 4 times a, which is 1, times c, which is negative 9. Okay, all of that divided by 2a, which in this case is just 2. So now I have negative 3 plus or minus, and then I have the square root of 9 minus what is negative 4 times the negative 9 there is actually plus 36. All of that divided by 2. So then I get here the negative 3. If I can get this, plus or minus the square root of 45. All of that divided by 2. So now, all I want to do is type this into the calculator to solve. So I type this in the calculator, I do the plus first. So I do negative 3, my calculator, negative 3, plus the square root of 45, and all of that divided by 2, and I get 1.85. Then I do it again. Now this time I'm going to do it in green with the minus. So I do negative 3 minus the square root of 45, all of that divided by 2, which comes out to negative 4.85. And there's my two answers, okay, solved by the quadratic equation, but it's a not equal. Why is it a not equal? Because it's what we don't want it to equal on the bottom. Okay, so not too bad, not too confusing. Here's another example. So this is example 2. This is just now teaching us to simplify. So example 2, to simplify here, and look at part A. We have 4a cubed divided by 8a. Remember what we do with the exponents? We subtract. So what is 3 minus 1? Well, we're going to be left with a squared on top. What is 4 divided by 8? Well, that's 1 over 2. So the answer there would simply be a squared divided by 2, because you don't have to have the 1 to show. Okay? Then you can look there at part B, because that's really easy to do. You factor it out and take out what you can. Pretty straightforward, okay? Because I want to keep going here so we get the more complicated ones. So now, what happens, let's look at example 3. And this is really where we're combining all of the things that we've learned. So example 3, look at part A. We have 3 times x minus 1 divided by 3. Now this is where what we're doing is we're saying, what do they have? Look, that has a 3, that has a 3. So our final answer is just x minus 1. Or let's look at this one, part B, is 4 times a plus 3 divided by, down here, a plus 3. Look what they have in common, a plus 3. And we can cancel it out, and we just are left with the 4, right? And then you look at the top one there, part C of that one, you have 3x plus 6 divided by 3. Look at this, we can factor a 3 out of both, and that equals 3 times x plus 2 divided by 3. You see we took out this 3 and a 3 from there. Now they cancel out, and our final answer is just x plus 2. Okay, so you got to make sure that you have that. Now, we can do this with our binomials and polynomials. So this is on the next page. This is example 4. Okay, you'll definitely want to watch this. This is x squared plus 4x plus 4, all divided by x squared minus 4. So now I have to factor. I'm trying to find I'm trying to simplify here. So I got to factor this guy and this guy. So let's start with the top one. So I have x times x. Okay, so what times what is 4? We got 4 and 2, but then added together, see they're both plus, is going to give me 4x. Well, 2 plus 2 is 4, and 2 times 2 is 4. So I know it's going to be plus 2 and plus 2. Divided by, right, that's the top. And now I got to factor this guy. Now, if you remember, this is a difference of squares, right? I can take the square root of both, and I get x, and I have x minus 2, x plus 2. So I rewrite that down here, x plus 2, x minus 2. Now, I say, what do they have in common? Well, this has an x plus 2, and this has an x plus 2. These guys, though, don't have a match, the ones that I just highlighted in black, so they must stay. So the final answer is x plus 2 divided by x minus 2. Okay, that is my final answer. I cannot, here's the thing, I cannot cross out the 2's or the x's. Okay, that is not allowed because it's a whole unit. So there is my final answer. Okay, I'm going to do one more example, and then we're going to jump in to said homework. Okay, so let's look at example 5. Example 5. So I hope you're paying attention. Follow along with these examples. We get 4x squared plus 4x minus 48 divided by 3 minus x. Okay? So that's important to remember. Now we got to see what can we pull out of these. Well, we can pull out a 4. So I'm going to divide this by 4 on the top, and I'm going to get x squared plus x minus 12. And on the bottom, I still have my 3 minus x, right? It hasn't changed any. So I'm going to erase this so I can go to the right here. So what happens when I try and factor this right here? Well, I have a 12 and I have a plus. So I know it's going to be 4 times x. And now what times what is 12 and gives me a difference of 1? Well, if it's 4 and 3, when they subtract, 4 minus 3 is 1, so that's what I want. It's a positive, so the plus is with the 4, and the negative is with that. I have x, sorry, I have 3 minus x. Okay? Now, this is where it's real tricky. And this is something it's kind of evil of them to do. But I have to look down here and say, see how that's x minus 3, that's 3 minus x. So I need this one to be negative and this one to be positive to match up there. So what I'm going to do is I am going to take this and divide a negative 1 out of it. I'm going to divide by negative 1. Okay, I don't know why I wrote it over there, but I'm going to divide by negative 1. And when I do that, I end up getting x minus 3, right? It switches to the negative sign there and puts it there. So as long I can do that as long as then I write the negative 1 times x minus 3. Now that I have something in common, look what I can do. I can cross out the x minus 3, and I'm left, and this negative 1 just goes to the top, and I'm left with negative 4. Right, this 1 goes to that negative, and then I'm just negative 4 x plus 4. There's my final answer. Now, one thing I forgot to mention that is very important, right, is that you see this guy right here. He was negative 1 times x minus 3. What I need to do is I need to set him equal to 0, just this part, right, the x minus 3 part, to make sure that I don't get 0 on the bottom. So I have, let me erase this over here so I have some space. So I have x minus 3 equals 0 plus 3 plus 3, and I'll look at x equals 3. So x cannot equal 3, and x equals, that's the most simplified, right? Negative 4 x times x plus 4. So you have to do those in tandem together. Okay, so if you look back on example 4, there we had something like this left on the bottom. I'm just going to write this was our final answer to the previous one. I would also need to say, so this is my answer, but then I also need to say, guess what? X minus 2 equals 0. Add 2, add 2. X cannot equal 2. So this is also true of that same problem, right? This is the answer, but then it says, what are the excluded? Well, we still can't have the x cannot equal 2. Okay, so here's our homework. This is 13.1. This is page 535, and we are doing 2 through 22 even. Okay, so I know it's a harder lesson, but guess what, guys? It's our second to last lesson. We're so close to being done. Hang in there. You guys are doing great. Mr. H misses you, and I will see you all soon. Mr. H, over and out.